Imagine waking up in a world where the air is thick with intention, yet completely void of sound. You look at your neighbor, desperate to share a thought, but your throat remains a barren tunnel where no vibrations can form. What if humanity never developed the capacity for speech? To understand this, we must look at the biology of the silence. The human larynx sits lower in the throat than in our primate cousins. This physiological shift, occurring roughly 200,000 years ago with the emergence of Homo sapiens, is the bedrock of our existence. If we stayed silent, we would likely never have developed the FOX2 gene mutation. This specific sequence of DNA is what allows us to process the complex syntax required for language. Without it, our brains would look fundamentally different. The frontal lobe, the center of our higher-order thinking, is deeply intertwined with our ability to categorize the world through words. If you remove the ability to speak, you don't just lose the sound, you lose the conceptual framework for time, causality, and abstract planning. Think about how you remember your childhood. Most of your memories are encoded in a narrative structure. You tell yourself stories about who you are. Without a language to label these events, human identity would be purely sensory. You would live in a perpetual high-definition now. There would be no past regrets to haunt you, and no future anxieties to keep you awake. You would exist as a creature of pure stimulus and response. Social structures would collapse overnight. In 1960, the primatologist Jane Goodall discovered that chimpanzees use complex gestures and grunts to navigate their hierarchy. If humans never spoke, we would likely exist in groups no larger than 150 individuals. This is known as Dunbar's number. It is the cognitive limit of how many stable social relationships a primate brain can manage without the efficiency of language to gossip, bond, and establish reputation. Any group larger than this would descend into chaos because we wouldn't have the tools to coordinate, plan hunts, or distribute labor over vast distances. Technological progress would grind to a halt. Think about the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It required the orchestration of 20,000 workers, specific architectural blueprints, and a logistical chain that spanned the entirety of Egypt. Try building a cathedral without being able to explain the concept of a lever or geometry to someone else. You could demonstrate it, sure, but complex knowledge is fragile when it has to be taught through imitation alone. You can't pass down the principles of physics through a pantomime. Scientific breakthroughs rely on the ratchet effect. Each generation takes the knowledge of the previous one and adds to it. We store this information in books, servers, and classrooms. Without language, the ratchet breaks. We would be doomed to repeat the same basic discoveries every generation. Every human would spend their entire life learning how to start a fire, only to die before they could ever contemplate the stars. But what about the inner life? What happens to the self? Cognitive scientists often debate the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which suggests that the language you speak determines how you perceive reality. If you don't have a word for blue, can you even see the color? Research on the Himba people of Namibia suggests that while we can all perceive colors, our ability to categorize and recall them is dictated by our vocabulary. In a silent world, the spectrum of human emotion might be duller. You wouldn't have the words for bittersweet, nostalgia, or injustice. These aren't just feelings. They are social constructs built by language. Without them, your inner world would be limited to visceral experiences like pain, hunger, pleasure, and fear. Life would be incredibly intense, yet terrifyingly lonely. Relationships would be purely transactional or based on physical proximity. You would know your family through the scent of their skin, the warmth of their touch, and the rhythmic pattern of their presence. Trust would be based entirely on deeds. A liar would be an impossible concept. How do you deceive someone when you cannot construct a falsehood through a sentence? Lying requires a sophisticated manipulation of reality. In a silent world, reality is what is physically present. You can only be a liar if you can describe something that isn't there. Governance, laws, and borders would be non-existent. Concepts like property rights or human rights require a collective agreement that is codified in writing or speech. Without language, the only law would be the law of the physical. The strongest, the fastest, and the most cunning would dominate, just as they do in the animal kingdom. We would not have the concept of a nation or a state. These are abstract fictions that only exist because we all agree to talk about them as if they are real. The history of humanity is the history of noise. The roar of the printing press, the clicking of the telegraph, the digital hum of the internet. It is all just an extension of that first tentative sound emitted by our ancestors. If we took away the ability to speak, we wouldn't just be quiet. We would be fundamentally different organisms. We would be perfectly adapted to our immediate surroundings, masters of the physical world, yet utterly oblivious to the universe of ideas. We would have no regrets, no gods, no laws, and no legacy. We would be a species that left no mark, because a mark only becomes history when someone is there to name it. As you sit in the silence of your room, try to strip away the words in your mind. Stop naming the objects you see. Stop labeling your feelings. Don't think of the lamp, the chair, or my loneliness. Just look, just feel. For a few seconds, you might catch a glimpse of what the world would look like if we had never found our voices. It is a world of incredible beauty, yet it is a world where the light of consciousness is dim. We are a loud, messy, and argumentative species, but our noise is exactly what separates us from the dust. We speak, therefore we are. And in that speech, we have built a world that reaches far beyond the boundaries of our own skin. If we never spoke, we would have survived as animals, but we would have failed to become human. The real question isn't what we would lose if we were silent, but whether we realize how much we owe to the simple vibration of air that connects us all.